Hey, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Hope you guys are enjoying your day so far, and I hope you're ready to learn a little bit more about the Swift programming language in today's video. Now, what I'm going to go over today is how to use something called a closure inside of our iOS applications, and what exactly is a closure and how do we write them. Well, for a lot of you guys that have been programming in iOS for a while, closures are kind of what you guys use to perform completion handlers for things like URL session and loading data from some kind of external service. The way I'm going to illustrate exactly how to write a closure in today's video is to go over a very simple algorithm on how to filter a set of numbers given some kind of predicate or condition. All right, so let me illustrate this by using playgrounds right here. And I have nothing written in my playground so far, so I want to write out this function here that I would like you guys to kind of think about how to implement. So this function will be called filter, and it's going to be filter greater than value right here. And the value is going to be an integer like that. And this function also takes in another parameter, which will be numbers. And this number is just a list of integers inside of an array. And at the very end, I want you guys to return the list of integers that kind of meet this condition right here. All right, so pretty good stuff. And as you can already tell at the very bottom, we have some syntactical errors. And the way we want to fix this is just simply return an empty array for now. All right, so that makes the error go away, which means that I can go ahead and call this function filter greater than value. And let's say I have a value of 3 and a list of numbers of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and perhaps 10 at the very end. Okay, so the filtering function right here should filter this entire set of numbers, and anything that's greater than 3, I should get back inside of my list. So let's say let filtered list equals all of that stuff on the right, and I should get a list of 4, 5, and 10. All right, so how exactly do I do this? Well, let's just simply use a for loop to iterate through all of my numbers and just print them out one at a time. So for num inside of all of my numbers within that list, let's print out what each and every number is. All right, so doing so, I get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 10 at the very bottom, which is pretty good. And how do we check whether or not a value is greater than another value? Well, this is very simple. If you just use an if statement, so if, let's see, num is greater than value, I will print out num. So let me just paste that in there, get the spacing correct. And now the function will run, trying to get me this filtered list. And you see I am printing out now 4, 5, and 10. So that's one step closer to where I want to be. And filtered list right now, if you just print it out, you'll see that it is an empty list because we're just returning this empty list right here. And you should be able to see something. So you see this right here, the empty list. And now the final step is to create some kind of variable for me to hold on to all of the numbers that kind of meet this condition of greater than value. So let's just go up here and say var, perhaps filter set of numbers equals something. So this something, I'm going to initialize it as an empty array of integers through this syntax like that. Now I'm going to also return this, and because this starts off as an empty list, the logic that we had before is exactly the same. And all we're missing is, instead of just printing out the number, I'm going to say filtered set of numbers dot append new element, and simply pump in the value of num, which in this case will be the 4, the 5, and the 10. So pretty simple and pretty straightforward, and I expect most of you guys to be able to do this. And going through some of these simple exercises really helps everyone to learn how to write out some of the code for the syntax of Swift. So hopefully this helps you out. And let's say I change this to perhaps a 1. I'll get 2, 3, 4, 5, and 10 inside of my list of filtered numbers. All right, so this is kind of the first part of the video today, and I would like to kind of show you guys how to use closures so that I can improve this function. And what I really want to do is, instead of having this kind of hard-coded function of checking for something like greater than a value, what if I wanted to just have some kind of condition instead of greater than value? So what I mean is, let's say I want to check this list right here for all values that are less than 5, right? That means that I have to change this to a 5, and then I have to go inside of this function here and just modify this greater than to be a less than, like that. And then at the very end, my filter list will be 1, 2, 3, and 4. All values are kind of less than 5. Now, one thing that I failed to do is to change the function name to be less than value. So you would go ahead and do that. Filter lesser than value, change that as well. And now everything is okay. So this means that every time I want to modify the kind of the logic inside of this function of filtering, I have to modify this thing here and also the function name. So a better way of doing this is to introduce something called a closure inside of your code so that you can just pass in some kind of predicate and then allow the predicate to perform the condition checking logic, which is this line number on line number 8. So how do I do that? Well, let's do this again by writing out a new function, and I'm going to spell it out completely with a long function name of filter with predicate closure. And you probably don't want to name your functions as long as this, but I'm just doing this for the example's sake. So let's say what exactly is this predicate closure? Well, let's just call this parameter a closure. And this closure parameter for this function is going to be a function itself. So what I mean is it's going to take in an int and it's going to return a boolean like that. And just like the example up here, it's also going to take in a list of numbers via this array of integers like that. And then at the very end, it's also going to return some kind of integer array. And because this is requiring us to return an int array, let's just go ahead and return a blank array like so. All right, so pretty good stuff, and that error should go away. And now let me comment out that. And let's say I want to perform the exact same logic as filtering lesser than value of 5 or greater than 3. You can now do this by saying let filtered list equals filter with predicate closure. And what is this closure? Well, you can just hit enter and you'll get the autocomplete to fill out some of this code for you. And for the integer, let's just say it's num. And for the code, I'm going to return some kind of Boolean value because that's what I've specified as my Boolean or my return for the closure. And I'm going to say num less than 5. And then for the numbers right here, the numbers, let me just copy over this entire array and pump that in there. And let's just print out what filtered list is like so. All right, so hopefully this stuff should work, but because I'm not applying any of that logic inside of this function yet, I still get an empty array because that's all I am returning. So now the question is, how do I even apply the logic of this closure? Well, it is exactly the same as it is above. So let's just write out the for loop first. So for number in numbers, I need to perform some kind of check. So perform some condition check here. And the way we perform the check is to just say if closure, if this closure right here using some kind of integer, which is the number inside of my for loop like that, if that returns a Boolean value, we will append it into some kind of empty array of numbers. So let's just copy or perhaps type this out again. So filtered numbers equals an empty list of numbers. Inside of here, we'll say filtered numbers dot append some kind of new element, and we'll just append the number. All right, and then finally we'll just return the filtered numbers, which is this starting array of numbers right there. And at the very end, we see that the console is printing out 1, 2, 3, and 4, which means that it's kind of meeting this requirement of number less than 5. So let's say I change this to number less than 20. It's going to filter this entire list, and all the numbers that are less than 20 are going to end up inside of my filtered list of numbers. So let's kind of go over how this works one more time. So the closure that we're passing into this entire function is this closure parameter that we later on use right here. So every time we're iterating through our list of numbers, we have number, and then we apply that closure, which is going to apply this logic right here of checking if the number is less than 20. So based on that logic, we can simply make a modification here to get other predicates or other conditions to match the filtering that we want to apply. So number greater than 2, which means that I get 3, 4, 5, and 10. So that's kind of how closures work. And I want to show you guys how to write out closures so that you don't have to pass in this strange bit of syntax right here. And this is kind of the power of the closure syntax, and it makes it so that you can write out your filtering functions as a separate function and then just apply it inside of your function call. So that might sound confusing, so let me show you exactly what I mean through a little bit of code here. So let's say function, and let's say greater than 3. This is my closure function that I'll use later on. And this function takes in some kind of number, which is an int, and then it'll just return a boolean like that. And then now what I want to do is just say return value greater than 3. So just value greater than 3 is what this function is supposed to do. And so I'm going to now say, let's see if I just comment that guy out, and let's say let filtered list equals filter with predicate closure. And this guy, I'm going to actually use the function itself because it is a function that takes in an int and returns a boolean. I can just paste that in there. And for the list of numbers, let's give it a 10, 5, 1, or 1, and 2, and 0. Okay, so what does this really give me? Let me just paste that up there. I get the values of 10 and 5 inside of this filtered list right here, and all of these values are greater than 3, which means that the closure is working properly. So what else can I do? Well, I can specify another function, perhaps function divisible by 5, like that. Let's just use the word instead of the number, and this also takes in an int and returns a boolean. So division by 5, anything that is divisible by 5, you can just say return value modulus 5 is equals 0, which for those of you guys are unfamiliar with modulus, this pretty much gives you the remainder of the division of value and 5, and if the remainder is 0, that means it's divisible by this number right here. So let's just do this one more time. Let me comment out the initial call and let filtered list equal filter with predicate. And I'm going to use divisible by 5 as my closure function. And let's just use 20, 30, 1, 2, let's see, 9, and 15. And it should give me 20, 30, and some of these other functions or numbers right here. Okay, so what am I missing? I think I need to add an ed for filtered list, and I'll get my function call to call successfully on this set of numbers using divisible by 5, getting me 20, 30, and 50 down here. So again, the advantage of using a function and using closures like this is you can spell out exactly what your filtering functions are and what your predicate what it's supposed to do inside of separate functions so that you can just pass it directly inside of your other function calls. And this way you can compose other functions with your filter functions to make your program just a little bit more robust. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for today's video. Hopefully you enjoyed this very short lesson on how to write closures, how to use them, and also how to apply the closure logic within another function. And so the reason why closures are important is because if you implement them correctly inside of your applications, it makes your program much more robust and very easy to maintain as well. And sometimes you'll even get this question inside of an interview, and the interviewer might want to kind of ask you how to implement a closure on your own. So hopefully you enjoyed today's video. If you want to download the source code for today's Playground project, you can find the link down in the description below. And hopefully you guys give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, keep on coding, guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.